There is a flower that drips nectar so thick you can pour it on toast. It needs no bees, no hive, and no keeper. It comes back every year on its own. You have probably pulled one out of your lawn and thrown it away. And by the end of this video, you will know how to make an endless golden sweetener from 3 plants you can grow in a pot in your backyard. Centuries ago, European explorers documented the rich traditions of the Amambai region in what is now Paraguay. The indigenous Guarani people, who had deeply understood this landscape for generations, shared knowledge of a small, sweet leafy shrub that grew along stream banks. When a leaf was placed on the tongue, an intense sweetness flooded the mouth. By the late 19th century, Western scientists like Moises Bertoni formally documented the plant, introducing its remarkable properties to the wider global scientific community as a natural alternative to sugar that needed no plantation, no slave labor, no refining, no processing. It grew wild in the hills and spread on its own. The Guarani had been using it for over 1,500 years. They called it se'ehi, sweet herb. They chewed the raw leaves between meals. They dropped them into every bitter drink they brewed, and the plant asked nothing in return. No irrigation, no fertilizer, just rain and soil and time. Half a world away and centuries before the Spanish reached South America, another civilization had already solved sweetness in a completely different way. In the Valley of Mexico, the Aztecs revered a massive succulent so deeply they named it the Tree of Wonders. Some species stood taller than a man. Thick blue-green leaves edged with needle-sharp spines radiated from a central core, and hidden inside that core was a reservoir of sweet liquid the Aztecs called aguamiel, honey water. They drank it raw in the mornings. They fermented it into a sacred beverage called pulque that was reserved for priests and warriors and ceremonial feasts. They heated the raw sap slowly over open fire until it thickened into a dark, golden syrup that could be stored in clay vessels for months. The goddess Mihalov was said to be the divine mother of the agave, nursing 400 sacred children from her body. That is how central this single plant was to an entire civilization. Not just a crop, a foundation. They wove the fibers into rope and cloth. They sharpened the needle tips into sewing awls. They dried the massive flower stalks and used them as roof beams. And the sweet liquid from the heart of the plant fed families across Mesoamerica for more than 1,000 years before any Europeans set foot on that soil. Now cross the Atlantic. Every spring, for as far back as anyone can remember, families across Central and Eastern Europe walked into meadows and gathered the bright yellow heads of a flower so common it turned entire fields to gold. Czech grandmothers in the countryside outside Prague filled wicker baskets with this while their grandchildren ran through the grass. Irish foragers along the stone wall hedgerows of County Cork and County Kerry did the same. Families in rural Sweden, in Bavaria, in Brittany, in the hills outside Vienna, all followed the same quiet tradition. They brought the flowers home. They pulled the bright petals free and dropped them into pots of water with a few slices of lemon. They simmered it low. They strained it. They added sugar and let it reduce for an hour or two on the back of the stove until the liquid thickened into a golden syrup. The result tasted remarkably close to clover honey, not similar, nearly identical in color, in texture, in the way it stretched off a spoon. You could spread it on dark bread, stir it into black tea, drizzle it over fresh cheese, and most people sitting at that kitchen table could not tell the difference between what came from a beehive and what came from a pot of meadow flowers. This plant grows on every continent except Antarctica. You have seen it in every lawn you have ever walked across. You may have spent money and hours trying to kill it, and the whole time it was making free honey. 3 plants, 3 continents, thousands of years of use. Not one of them required a single bee, and somehow almost nobody alive today knows any of them exist. The global honey market is worth roughly $9 billion. Every year, hundreds of millions of jars move off supermarket shelves around the world. and a staggering percentage of what sits inside those jars is not real honey. Independent laboratory analysis has repeatedly found that between 30 and 40% of all honey sold globally is adulterated, cut with cheap rice syrup from China, diluted with high fructose corn syrup, blended with industrial cane sugar, relabeled and repackaged and shipped through third countries to disguise its true origin. Drums of adulterated honey move from factory ports in Asia through repackaging operations in Vietnam and India, and then arrive in Western supermarkets stamped with labels that say pure and natural and raw. The fraud has become so pervasive that major international honey competitions have been forced to cancel their judging categories because too many entries failed purity tests. Honey is one of the 3 most commonly faked foods on Earth, right alongside olive oil and milk. Meanwhile, the bees themselves are vanishing. In 1947, the United States had roughly 6 million managed honeybee hives spread across farms and orchards and apiaries from coast to coast. By 2008, that number had collapsed to 2.4 million, a 60% decline in 6 decades. Since colony collapse disorder was first identified in 2006, annual winter losses in American bee colonies have averaged around 30%. In some years, losses have climbed close to 50%. The bees are being killed by pesticide exposure, parasitic varroa mites, loss of wildflower habitat, and the stress of industrial pollination contracts that truck hives thousands of miles across the country to service monoculture almond orchards and blueberry fields. The insect that the entire honey industry depends on is in free fall. The product is becoming scarcer and more expensive to produce honestly every single year. So here's the picture. An industry worth $9 billion built on an insect in crisis, selling a product that is frequently counterfeit at prices that climb every grocery trip. Now ask yourself, what would happen to that system if ordinary people discovered they could produce a golden syrup identical to honey from a flower growing in a roadside ditch? What would happen if they found out about a leaf so sweet that 3 of them replace an entire cup of sugar? What would happen if a plant the Aztecs worshipped as divine could be grown in a bucket on a patio and turned into sweetener with nothing but a kitchen pot? It would threaten every link in the chain, and that is exactly why none of this was ever taught to you. In 1991, the United States Food and Drug Administration issued an import alert on a plant that indigenous communities in South America had been consuming safely for more than 1,500 years. The alert banned the importation of the leaves and any food product containing them into the United States. The official justification was inadequate toxicological information. 15 centuries of documented daily human consumption across multiple cultures, banned for insufficient safety data. The enforcement did not stop at the border. Federal agents visited health food stores across the country that had been selling the dried leaves on their shelves. Products were confiscated. Inventory was seized. And then something happened that should make you stop and reread this sentence twice. The FDA dispatched United States Marshals to a small company in Texas that had published a cookbook, a book of recipes, instructions for how to use this leaf as a natural sweetener in everyday home cooking. The Marshals traveled to that company to witness the physical destruction of every copy. Federal officers standing in a warehouse watching books be destroyed because those books told American consumers how to sweeten their tea with a leaf that grows in a windowsill pot. During those same years, food scientists in Japan had been studying the exact same plant since the early 1970s. They had performed extensive safety testing. They had monitored commercial use across the Japanese population for decades. They found no adverse health effects, no toxicity, no harmful side effects of any kind. Japan approved the plant for widespread commercial use, and by the early 2000s, it had captured more than 50% of the entire Japanese sweetener market. Half of all sweetening products consumed in one of the most health-conscious nations on Earth came from a single plant. Over 30 years of mass daily use, Zero safety incidents. So why was it banned in America while Japan was putting it in soft drinks, soy sauce, and chewing gum? Follow the money. The artificial sweetener industry at that time was generating billions of dollars a year in the United States alone. Aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, little colored packets on every restaurant table and in every grocery checkout lane. And one of the largest agrochemical corporations on the planet had already purchased a patent in the 1980s on a process to refine this exact plant into a commercial sweetener product. A free leaf that anyone could grow in a windowsill pot was competing directly with a multi-billion-dollar synthetic sweetener supply chain. The plant was not pulled from the market because it was dangerous. It was pulled because it was free. This is not conspiracy, this is economics. The leaf is called stevia. Its full scientific name is Stevia rebaudiana. The Guarani of Paraguay called it Sei. In English, it goes by honey leaf, candy leaf, or sweet leaf of Paraguay. It belongs to the sunflower family. It grows 1 to 2 feet tall with small white flowers and soft green leaves. And those leaves are between 200 to 300 times sweeter than table sugar. 3 fresh leaves will sweeten a full cup of tea. A small handful will sweeten a pitcher of lemonade. One single plant growing in a pot on your kitchen windowsill will produce enough sweetness to replace your sugar bowl for an entire growing season. Here is how you grow it. Stevia is a tender perennial native to the warm, humid highlands of Paraguay and Brazil. In warmer climates, it comes back year after year on its own. Everywhere else you grow it as an annual or simply bring the pot indoors before the first frost arrives. It wants full sun. It wants moist soil that drains well. It does not tolerate standing water. Start from seed or from stem cuttings taken from a friend or a nursery plant. If starting from seed, press them gently onto the surface of the soil. Do not bury them. They need light to germinate. Keep the soil consistently moist and warm. Germination takes anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. Once established, pinch the growing tips regularly to encourage bushy side branching. More branches means more leaves. More leaves means more sweetness. Harvest about 90 days after planting. The best time to cut is just before the flower buds open. Once the plant flowers, sweetness in the leaves drops noticeably. When you see buds forming, pinch them off and harvest. Cut stems about 6 inches above the soil line. Strip the leaves, dry them in the shade for a day or two until they snap cleanly when you bend them. Crush them into powder or store them whole in an airtight jar. One plant in a 6-inch pot on a sunny windowsill. It grows like basil. It tastes like honey. And it replaces every packet of processed sweetener in your kitchen. Stevia is grown commercially today in Japan, China, Thailand, Paraguay, and Brazil. In Korea, they call it seuptebia. In India, it is known as madhupatra, the honey leaf. In Mexico, they call it hierba dulce. But this plant does not need a commercial farm. It needs a pot, a handful of soil, and a window that catches morning light. The second plant is agave, the tree of wonders. Over 200 species grow across the Americas, from the arid deserts of northern Mexico to the tropical highlands of Colombia and Venezuela. The species most people recognize is blue agave, the same plant used to produce tequila and mezcal. But before anyone ever distilled it into spirits, this plant was food. For thousands of years, its primary purpose was sweetness. In traditional villages across the Mexican states of Oaxaca, Jalisco, and Puebla, a person called a tlachiquero still performs the ancient harvest. When a mature agave sends up its towering flower stalk, the tlachiquero cuts it at the base before it has a chance to bloom. That wound opens a bowl-shaped cavity deep in the heart of the plant, and the agave responds by weeping sweet sap into that hollow. The sap is agua miel, honey water. The tlachiquero returns twice each day, once at dawn and once at dusk, to scoop out the collected liquid with a long-handled gourd. A single mature plant can produce sap this way for weeks on end. Some large specimens yield 20 to 25 liters of aguamiel over a full harvest cycle. The fresh sap is sweet and slightly tangy, drinkable straight from the cavity. Pour it into a heavy pot. Set the heat as low as it will go. Stir occasionally as the hours pass. The liquid reduces. The color deepens from pale gold to dark amber. The kitchen fills with warm caramel. When it coats the back of a spoon and drips in a slow ribbon, it is done. Thick and rich. Sweeter than honey, no enzymes added, no chemical processing, just sap and heat and patience. You can grow agave in a container anywhere on Earth. It is a succulent. It wants dry, well-draining soil, full sun, and very little water. In cold climates, grow it in a large pot and wheel it indoors before the first freeze. Blue agave takes 8 to 12 years to reach maturity. Smaller species are widely available at garden centers and nurseries, and they mature faster. A single agave on a sunny patio in Arizona, or a balcony in Barcelona, or a rooftop garden in Seoul will reward your patience with gallons of golden sweetener. Families in rural Mexico have been doing this with the same species, the same method, and the same clay pots for 1,000 years. The third plant is dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. It is growing in your yard right now. It is the plant your neighbor sprays with herbicide every April. It is the thing city parks departments spend thousands of dollars each spring trying to poison out of public lawns. The name comes from the French dent de lion, meaning lion's tooth, for the jagged shape of its serrated leaves. It grows wild on every continent except Antarctica. Every single part of the plant is eatable. The roots make a coffee substitute when roasted. The young leaves go into salads. The stems carry milky sap. But the flowers are what we are here for. Those bright yellow heads that carpet every unmowed lawn from early spring through late autumn contain flavonoid pigments that, when simmered with water and lemon and sugar, produce a golden syrup nearly impossible to tell apart from clover honey. In taste, in color, in viscosity, in the way it stretches when you lift a spoon from the jar. Czech families call it Pampaliskovi med, dandelion honey. In Ireland, the recipe has been handed down through generations of rural households. In Germany, it is Löwenzahnhonig. In Sweden, Maskrosirap. Across a dozen countries, people have been quietly making this every spring for as long as anyone can remember. You do not need to plant dandelions, they already grow everywhere. But if you want a reliable patch, scatter seeds in a pot or a dedicated corner of your garden. Full sun to partial shade, any soil, no fertilizer, no fuss. They germinate in days, they bloom within weeks. Each plant produces multiple flushes of flowers across the growing season. They reseed themselves without help. Once you have dandelions, you will always have dandelions. An infinite source of free sweetener that never asks to be replanted. Now here is how to turn each of these into something you can pour from a jar. For stevia, harvest the leaves just before flowering. Dry them in shade for 1 to 2 days until they snap when bent. Crush the dried leaves into a fine powder. A 1/4 teaspoon of stevia powder carries the sweetening power of a full cup of white sugar. Use it directly in baking, smoothies, tea, anything. For a pourable liquid version, steep a handful of dried leaves in hot water just below boiling for 30 minutes. Strain through a fine mesh. The resulting liquid is intensely sweet. A few drops will transform a full glass of iced tea. If you want something thicker with the body and viscosity of syrup, reduce that liquid gently on the lowest heat your stove can manage. Stir in a small amount of vegetable glycerin to give it weight. Pour it into a dark glass bottle. Cap it tightly. Store in the refrigerator. It keeps for months. One harvest from a single plant fills a bottle that will outlast every box of sugar packets you have ever purchased. For agave, the full traditional method requires a mature plant that has been growing for years. If you do not have one yet, purchase raw aguamiel or unprocessed agave sap from a Latin grocery store or an online supplier. Do not use the commercial agave nectar sold in mainstream supermarkets. That product is typically processed at high temperatures with industrial enzymes and has little in common with the original. What you want is the raw SAP. Pour it into a heavy-bottomed pot. Set the burner to its lowest setting, stir occasionally, and walk away. Let it work. Over several hours, the liquid will slowly reduce and concentrate. It will shift from pale straw to deep amber. The smell will change from grassy and vegetal to something warm, round, and unmistakably caramel. When the syrup coats the back of a wooden spoon and falls in a slow, heavy ribbon, take it off the heat. Pour it into sterilized glass jars while it is still warm. Seal them. Let them cool on the counter. What you are holding is aguamiel syrup, the original honey of the Americas, made the way Aztec families in the Valley of Mexico made it 1,000 years ago. If your own agave plant reaches maturity and sends up a flower stalk, cut it before it blooms. Scrape the cavity smooth. Cover it with a stone or cloth. Return twice daily with a ladle. Collect the sap, heat, and reduce. One mature plant, one season, gallons of golden sweetener. Now for dandelion honey. This is the one you can do this weekend. Go outside on a sunny morning when the flowers are wide open. Avoid picking from roadsides or anywhere that has been sprayed with chemicals. Walk to a clean meadow or your own untreated yard. Pick between 200 and 400 flower heads. The more you pick, the more syrup you make. Bring them home to your kitchen table. Pull the bright yellow petals away from the green base of each flower. The green parts are bitter. They will ruin the flavor. You want only the petals. It takes a little time. Put on some music, enjoy the process, fill a pot with about 4 cups of water. Drop in all the petals. Add 2 or 3 thin slices of lemon. Bring it to a gentle simmer, not a rolling boil. A soft, patient simmer for 30 minutes. Then remove the pot from the heat. Cover it with a lid. Let it sit overnight. By morning, the liquid will have turned a deep gold and the kitchen will smell like a wildflower meadow. Strain everything through cheesecloth or a fine mesh strainer. Squeeze the petals hard. Press out every last drop. Measure the liquid. Add an equal weight of sugar. Return it to the stove. Bring it to a low simmer. Stir from time to time. Skim any foam that rises to the surface. Let it cook gently for 1 to 2 hours. Watch carefully in the last 30 minutes. You are waiting for the moment the liquid thickens and falls from the spoon the way real honey does. A slow golden thread. When it gets there, take it off the heat. Pour it into sterilized glass jars while it is still hot. Seal immediately. Turn the jars upside down. Let them cool completely. Then store them in your pantry. Dandelion honey keeps for months. Open a jar 3 weeks from now, dip a spoon in, hold it up to the light, and watch the golden syrup stretch and fall. Spread it on warm bread. Stir it into chamomile tea. Drizzle it over yogurt. Everything in that jar came from flowers you picked in your own yard on a quiet morning. No bees, no hive, no factory, no fraud, just a pot, some petals, and a little patience. A plant that sweetens for free and regrows every season generates 0 recurring revenue for anyone except the person growing it. 0 revenue means no brand, no distributor margin, no shelf space at the grocery store, no marketing budget, no lobbyist in a government building arguing that this plant matters. The multi-billion-dollar honey industry thrives on convenience and a vast commercial supply chain. Yet few consumers realize that a remarkably similar golden herbal syrup can be crafted right at home using flowers growing as close as a crack in the sidewalk. And so the plants get reclassified. They stop being food, they stop being medicine, they stop being part of traditions that stretch back thousands of years across dozens of cultures. Instead, they become weeds, nuisance species, things to mow, things to spray, things to eradicate with public money. Municipalities hire contractors to poison dandelions in public parks where children play. Chemical companies manufacture products designed specifically to wipe them from suburban lawns. Government agencies print management guides with step-by-step instructions for destroying them. And every spring, homeowners across the country walk outside with a bottle of herbicide and spray the one plant in their entire yard that could have given them free honey for the rest of their lives. 3 plants, no honeybees, no hive, and no commercial supply chain. The stevia on your windowsill, the agave on your patio, and the dandelion in the crack in the concrete. They are spending money to destroy them. Oh, and if longevity fascinates you, my friend runs a channel called The Centenarian's Garden, all about blue zone secrets and what actually helps people live past 100. Go check them out, you won't regret it.